What's up, everybody? This is another edition of Bulldog Uncensored. Got a really special episode tonight. You guys have seen my show a few times, and usually I bring like a musical colleague of mine, or a comic, or we've had all kinds of different people on here, professional wrestlers, but all of the above. But tonight we're gonna be tapping into something that I've never really discussed publicly before. As far as like what my beliefs are in the paranormal and that kind of thing. And today we have a man that is more than an expert on this, Father Bob Bailey. How are you, Bob?
Good. How are you? It's great
Good,
to be
good.
on.
Thanks for
Well, some
having me.
people have called me a comedian, so
Well, then we'll get along just fine. Oh boy. So yeah, I mean, I've gone through a couple of different movies and a few different books I've read about exorcisms and whatnot over the years, and the subject has always fascinated me. Um, what led you to actual going to seminary, rather? Uh,
well, I actually credit um, my mother's side of the family, my grandparents who lived next door. They were very much devout, and their witness of their faith really, really touched me. And but I also, my mother's cousin was a priest. And on every Tuesday, he would come to my grandparents' house next door, have supper with them. Then he used to sit out and smoke a cigar, and I would join him just for a conversation. We would speak a few hours. It was like every Tuesday. And I credit him for my knowledge of the faith, and I would ask him zillions of questions. And then I began a desire for wanting to be a priest. And I loved to pray, and I would play priest. I take my mother's little missal, hand missal, and pretend to even with the Latin. My cousin used to joke with my mother. He knows Latin more than most priests, uh, and that just cultivated that. And by the time I got to junior high school, it was solidified that's where I was going to head. So I went to a Catholic high school. They call it preparatory seminary at the time, and began my pursuit of that seriously.
so before all of that, what was your childhood like? Was that something that you thought about a lot or contemplated?
Yeah, honestly, I can't remember a time when I didn't want to be. Although when I was younger, I gotta say a joke. I was horrible in church. I was hyperactive, and boy, would I get a belt after after I got home because I was so rambunctious. And I remember a certain time that was like, oh, I don't want to go to church because I know that means I'm gonna have to take a bath before we go to mass. So I never liked going, and uh, God got the best joke out of it. He said, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna make you a priest." So, but it was we had a very close-knit family, and the faith was practiced, and many times we would go to shrines and stuff. I would want to go. My parents would take me. We had, with the Italian side of the family, we had feasts, and people over the house, to celebrate that, of course, with food and outings. And so it was very much a part of our life. That wasn't something we ever questioned, and it wasn't something I ever felt I rebelled from because it just was a part of me, part of us, our identity as a family. So, but it was positive. It wasn't anything that was forced on me. It wasn't anything that was a harsh thing. It was something I embraced. It was something positive.
No, it's really neat. I suppose when you're growing up at that point, whoever's around you most is going to have the biggest influence. And it seemed like that was definitely the case with you.
Yeah, yeah.
So obviously, getting into becoming a priest and all that kind of stuff. Um, like, was your faith always strong from the beginning, or was it something that you even struggle with today?
No, it was always strong, even as a child. In fact, my friends used to I used to bring them to church and, I used to talk to them about prayer and I would, and stuff, even to the point where some of them just kind of rolled their eyes back. I can remember saying, oh, here he goes again. But it was something I felt passionate about.
Mm.
So I never went the rebellious route. A lot of people did, but for some reason I didn't. And maybe it's because I never felt forced to go. We just went. I didn't question it. I'm sure my parents would have forced, would have told me you're going to mass with us, but it wasn't anything I questioned. It was just part of our family values. We would go to mass and then we go to McDonald's afterwards. So, or on a Sunday morning we would go to IHOP,
Yeah.
and the two just went together. And you know, uh, and then seeing everybody, back then, most people, even young people, were going. So, especially in my neighborhood, I lived on a street where we called everybody aunt and uncle
Right.
because they were either relatives of mine or they were from the same locale as my grandparents in Italy. So everybody was aunt and uncle. As kids, we were close, and and so back then the culture supported your values, and not so much today, but back then it did. So it made it kind of easy, to go the way I went.
Yeah, I suppose it wasn't, taboo or anything like that at that
No,
time.
no, no, not till I got a lot older, like maybe high school.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. So, I mean, me personally, I was baptized Catholic. I went through, community and whatnot, and I wasn't able to go through the CCD because the parish, unfortunately, at the time wasn't wheelchair accessible.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I mean that was common in the early 90s, so I mean it wasn't
Yeah,
completely
they've come a long way now, but back then, though, I could see where it wouldn't be easy.
yeah. So I mean I did my fair share of investigation of it and I had a grandmother that was a very devout Catholic. She went to mass um, almost every week, barring any health issues. And I can honestly say, like, it wasn't that I questioned the idea of a higher power. I think it was actually humans that drove me away from the church, per se.
Mhm.
Do you see that as a common issue?
Yeah, I think most people that have an issue is because they've had a bad experience with a person, whether the person representing the church, whether it was a priest or a nun or um, you know, people around them or a parent, you know, that was very harsh and so they would identify the religious practice with the harshness of the parents or the harshness of whoever. Um, yeah, and but for myself, because maybe I was trained at such a young age with my mother's cousin, and I shot every question imaginable to him, and he answered them. That you know, I saw the humanness in the
Mhm.
church, and even with the faith, and and that made me upset. But my faith was stronger than the human being. And I looked beyond that and I said, no, I believe in the faith. I'm just not crazy with the one who's representing it, you know?
Right.
So I think that's what saved me. But I know a lot of others who, you know, maybe weren't at the same place that I was at or the same level. And, it was what they saw scandalized them or upset them. And so they threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
Some came back afterwards in their adulthood.
Right. I mean, I kind of look at faith, particularly under that umbrella of Catholicism and whatnot, as it's one of those things that as you get older and you learn more and you study more history, it's kind of human condition to question it.
Sure.
So I think, it's a lifelong struggle for some of us.
Oh yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that searching,
Yeah,
questioning, you know. I'm sure I did some of that too, but some question more than ever, and it was a search, and it led them down a different journey than I did, but many of them at the end of that journey, in their adulthood, began to see beyond some of their objections into the faith itself, and would come back, especially when they had families of their own. You
right.
know, now they have to start answering questions about God and faith with their children. So it's like, oh, I better get back and understand my faith a little bit more, because kids ask the darndest questions.
Right, right. So, beyond that not working out for me, we ended up going to a Protestant church for a number of years. That was my father's church in town here. And, met a lot of good people, learned a lot. I got confirmed. And honestly, Father, I don't really know what shifted in me. Like I said, I think it might have been more of the human aspect and the disappointment and people rather than the idea of beyond that.
Hmm.
Um, but I always have had some sort of, I don't know if you call it sixth sense, but like a calling to, as you say before, like, um, the whole good versus evil, right down to the bare bones of it. And I feel like, if we're going to look through the Catholic glasses, so to speak, um, a lot of people will be like, well, I'm surprised you're not mad at God for putting you in a predicament medically the way you have been. Because I've suffered hundreds of fractures and lots of surgeries and pain and all kinds of not fun stuff.
Sure.
But I never once blamed God. I felt like,
And that's amazing.
yeah, I mean, I can't even really say where I stand as far as what my religious beliefs are at this point.
Hmm.
But regardless, having intuition and discernment is something that Creator gives us regardless. And I've always kind of felt like a strong draw to that. So I studied a little bit of demonology, not much. I took a lot of Bible lit classes in high school. Um, and just the whole paradox of it all fascinated me throughout my teen years. And then it became, okay, the struggle of, living in the world we live in and trying to understand the concept of sin and things like that. Like it's really hard to decipher all that. So, did you ever feel like you were ever feeling pulled away by anything energetically or otherwise from
Pulled away from.
like saying, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this isn't the right thing," or has it always been pretty sure in your mind?
Are you talking about the paranormal now?
Paranormal and more so just being a man of the cloth.
No, I honestly I haven't had with my vocation. Um, no, I mean I struggled with the imperfections of human beings, uh, whether that be an authority or witness of others. But no, no, I've always cherished my priesthood. Sometimes it's been difficult, particularly with things that have happened over the years with scandals and all that. It
Hmm.
made it tough, very tough for us. priests who were in the field because we had to suffer because of the sins of a few. So yeah, that those were very tumultuous years. But I got to say, the people, for the most part, still loved their priests and was still respectful, even non-believers. So that helped. As far as the paranormal, yeah, there were times I had to walk away, you know, um, because of just certain circumstances. And when you're dealing with the part of the paranormal that I'm dealing with, which is specialized in negative and dark and demonic, yeah, sometimes you have to walk away for a little while, and regroup. So yeah, and I tried to not long ago, I tried to walk away from it for the longest time, and it kept calling me back until now, where we have now a beautiful apostolate and network that's growing, thanks to another priest buddy of mine who's joined forces with me, and a lot of other good people in the paranormal, so, but yeah, there are times when and I think most people that are seasoned in this will probably tell you the same thing. Sometimes you have to walk away for a while. It's too intense. The
Mhm.
warfare sometimes is formidable and exhausting, and that's why I watch horror movies. I love Halloween. I love Halloween. How can you do that? How do you like Halloween and all that? Well, because I know fiction from nonfiction. I love vampire stories. I love good versus evil and all of that. And
Right.
because I know that's not real, but it's comic, kind of not comic, but it's just something that I like, and always have.
Well, and I think, regardless, I think some people don't realize that, just because you're in being in the priesthood doesn't mean you have, these normal uh hobbies or interests or what have you, like the
Mhm.
rest of us. I think they all kind of assume that, just you go into Second Corinthians all day and
Yeah,
nonstop.
yeah. I'm on my knees. I'm reading the Bible all day.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm praying and fasting. Yeah, no, I love doing genealogy. I've done my family history. I've helped others. I mean, I love doing that kind of stuff. I love historical things. Like the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. Anything like historical like that. When I went to Rome. I love to see the ruins and study the ancient Rome. So, yeah, yeah, we have a life also. We're not just ethereal up there and always in a cloud. That we're
Right.
normal human beings.
Yeah. So you start off in the priesthood and, go through that process. Did you immediately want to go the paranormal route, or was that just kind of like an instinctual calling for you?
That's a good question. Very good question. I think that it was a process. I was just
Okay.
it's a process because because my cousin also taught me. He was, an old time Italian Catholic priest, and so he taught me about visions, apparitions, spiritual warfare, the reality of evil and the devil. So I knew that at a young age, and it stuck with me. And saints, especially those who struggle with the enemy, and I always felt deep down that I wanted to be a priest also to be able to take people out of the realm of darkness. That was, I can remember that. I don't know how long, but definitely since my junior high school days, that was something I wanted to do. I was never involved in the paranormal because none of my friends were, but I was with apparitions and visions like Fatima and Lourdes and Medjugorje, Eucharistic miracles, uh, miracles of the saints and all of that. And so what people don't understand is that's Catholic paranormal.
Right.
The Shroud of Turin, the
Hmm.
Tilma of Our Lady Guadalupe, that's paranormal. So it wasn't to me a great leap of faith to go from that into believing in the spirit world and the paranormal, because I always had a belief in there was something beyond us, beyond this reality. Uh, However, um, I knew once I went into the priesthood, because that was kind of like, there was a growth and maturity about that whole desire for fighting evil.
Hmm.
I was going to be the next Saint Michael, but uh, but I will tell you one experience that I had when I knew that this was the way to go. Besides the fact of getting involved in a case, once I got involved in a case, a local case, I knew this is what I want to do. But I was with a group in Italy, and we had gone to this. We went first of all to see Padre Pio, who was a saint who fought the enemy. He was an amazing a saint who could read minds. He had the wounds of Christ. Well, near there was a cave called Monte Gargano, where Saint Michael appeared. And so we went there, and I had an amazing experience there. And while I was praying in one of the side chapels, I saw a vision. And in the vision that I had in my mind's eye, I saw St. Michael with his great sword. And at one point, he knighted me. You know how they have the knight, you tap on the head and on the shoulder.
Mhm.
He was knighting me. And then right after that, he took his sword and he handed it to me. And that's where I knew that this is where I should be headed. It was amazing.
Yeah, that must have been like visually stunning,
Yeah,
even in your mind's eye like that.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It was again, it was a very real vision, very real. I mean, for me to even remember it now with my memory, that's how I know when something's from God and not because I have no recollection, dreams and all that stuff. After a while, but the dreams that do stay with me, I know that it's something more important. Uh, and so at that point. That's where I started in the beginning when I had a group. It was PWSM, the Presidium Warriors of St. Michael. And, we were doing some great things, always local. We had a little show confronting the darkness. My partner, Rob, at the time, who was originally an investigator, then he wanted to come in and do the dark stuff. He felt the calling to assist me. And so we did that. And we had some great years of helping people. And then he and his family moved to the Carolinas. So that kind of sort of ended it for a while. I would do things here and there. But just this last year in 2025, when I joined forces with another priest on the West Coast, he's an Eastern Orthodox priest, Father Ken Torres. um, I had the vision of beginning what I call an apostolate, and it was the Holy Sword apostolate. And I named it after the Holy Sword from that vision that I had. And thanks to his ingenuity, he's a go-getter, and he came with a lot of with a lot of people behind him, and the ministry is growing and blossoming in areas. So I can't wait to see what the Lord's going to do. We have some really great people that have joined with us. Who have been in the paranormal for years. So not only do we have a clergy network that's growing, but we also have assessors. We have people who are that have a psychology background. We have people who are sensitive, gifted people, um, medical. So so it's growing to be a really holistic kind of thing because not every case that they claim to be paranormal is paranormal. Sometimes it's the person that has emotional issues that
Right.
need to be dealt with first, or instead, and we have to tell them. So, um, yeah. So now, right now, it's amazing the journey that we're being led. Uh, and I don't know if you heard of Joe Frankie.
Yeah, rings a
Uh,
bell.
yeah, he's now began the Warren Society
Oh,
to
great.
continue the legacy. Now, he would be a great one to have on your show,
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
and I'll give you the information. He would be more than happy to come on. He's
Nice.
known he knew since he was young the Warrens and worked with them, was tutored under them. Well, he's part of our group,
Oh,
and
great.
Father Ken and I are part of his new group that he started, the society. And some of those people, so we're kind of working both together, and it's amazing. It's amazing with the Lord and some gifted people, sensitives, who have the gift of sensitive and discernment of spirits, and the gift of knowledge. People call them mediums, and I don't like to use that word because it's overused. Everybody and their brother is claiming to be a medium, but I won't go there. But there are some real gifted people out there,
No, it's
and
it's funny you mentioned the mediums because I've had a few experiences with that. And some of my Catholic friends have been, very standoffish about it and saying that, that's the work of the devil and those kind of things. What do you say to that?
well, I think in the classic, in the biblical times, with mediums were, yeah, because they were working and conjuring not from God, but from whatever else is out there, and foretelling the future. And that's one thing that's a no-no, that God doesn't do that. He gives us knowledge as if, but to start talking about those kind of things, no. I mean, but if they can sense and see things that we don't see, and loved ones who might have been around, who might be around us, that in the Catholic faith, we have the communion of saints, and
Right.
so once our loved ones are in heaven, they can also be around us at the same time, because there's no time or space. We're spirit. We're not body anymore. So, but I don't like to use those words because they're confusing, you know. Like Lorraine Warren said, well, she's a psychic medium. I said, why? But how does that fit with our faith? And she said, no, it's really discernment of spirits. But in the paranormal world, it's called medium and clairvoyant and all of that,
Yeah.
clairvoyant, clairaudio, empaths, and all that. But some of these, if they're used in the right way, are gifts of the spirit, are gifts of God to be used for the people, and again, like sometimes when I pray for healing over people, um, I'll get a word of knowledge, and I'll just say, this is what I feel that the Lord's saying. I have no idea what it means, but just sit with it. And so, a lot of times they'll say, yeah, I know, yeah, it makes sense, or they'll take it home and ponder. That's the gift of knowledge, of the word, of a word. Other people like can sense evil spirits around. So they're all, it's all semantics. That's the issue, is semantics. And I think also because so many people claim to be mediums, that everybody's a medium, everybody's a psychic, everybody is ordained a minister, yeah, online, you know going through a course. I went 9 years of
Yeah.
study,
Yeah.
for my vocation. So anyways, but yeah, I can understand that because it is prohibited in the Bible. But they use, this is an important thing in the Old Testament, with the witch of Endor, when she was uh, conjuring up Solomon. Oh, that's forbidden, conjuring up,
Right.
because that's not the way it is. And they'll say, well, you're conjuring when you go and see spirits in the house, or go, no, we're not. I'm not conjuring. I'm trying to figure out what's in there, if there's something in there. And so I command in the name of the Lord, make yourself known, you know. And but people who don't know the right way of, and I always get in trouble when I say Ouija boards and seances are a no-no, and they are a no-no, because they can open doors, and especially people don't understand them. They don't know how to use them the right way. Um, and they're playing around with fire. And then things come through, and it's hard to shut those portals, to find them and shut them once these things come through.
Right.
So,
So with somebody in my position kind of struggling with faith and I've always found Revelation to be um interesting and whatnot. What should I try to avoid, like to not encounter that kind of thing?
now, do you do paranormal investigation?
No. I've had
Oh,
some paranormal experiences,
okay, okay.
but
Well, no, if you have a prayer life, reading scripture, having a prayer life, that's the important thing. Make sure you pray, make sure, ask for the protection. As Christians, we know we have guardian angels. And there's a prayer that I was taught as a child, and then you might have heard of it. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here. Ever this day be at my side, to light to God, to rule to God. That's a child's prayer. I still say it today twice, once in the morning, once before I go to bed, because we have guardian angels to protect us and to guide us. And they're important. They're underused. They're a gift. So I would just have a life of, try to have a life of faith, and practice of faith and have personal prayer. And then you don't have to worry about anything.
so your journey into the paranormal end of your career, what was the most like unsettling situation you found yourself in?
You mean like when I've gone into a case?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I think the one that was very formidable for me was a case that I worked on when we had PWSM. We went to a place in Massachusetts, it was a convenience store. They had some activity there, so they called us. So I went with my assistant, my partner, and with a investigative team to help us with texts and all that, special
Yeah.
and so we went in there, and I started to provoke to see if there was something there, and things began to happen. My friend, who's empathic, my partner, was really getting overcome. I mean, you could see it. He was getting disoriented and all. So I had to pray over him, for protection. Then he came out of it. And another time, as we were going through, one of the techs who was filming actually got bit, and we looked at his arm, and you could see it was like a snake or something bit him, and and things like that, and then something knocked down that really shouldn't have been knocked down because nobody was near there.
Hmm.
So we had those kind of things, and we did the deliverance, and things seemingly got better for the house, for the convenience store. However, what we didn't realize till after we got home was that something came home with my partner and followed him, and it was a seducing spirit, a
Hmm.
demon, and it began wreaking havoc in the house with his light. He couldn't sleep in. So, because he's a seasoned investigator, he knew what to do. So he had himself, um, he put a camera up while he was sleeping. You could see him thrashing around. And then another time when he was sleeping, you saw a candlestick move on its own from one side of the night table to the other. Um, when I was doing the deliverance, we had tech guys there, and all of a sudden, as we're doing them, one of the tech guys got scratched. And so when we lifted up his shirt, you could see the marks. And I believe that it was three of them. And he was spooked with that. And for me, it was disturbing because now this is my friend and his family.
Right.
So it was a personal thing for me. And it took a few times, but finally we got it out because I said, you got to use your personal power. And and because it was a seducing spirit, demon, I told the wife, you have to say, this is my husband. Keep away from him. You cannot do, and it worked. And then things, we even had, are you familiar with a siren? It's a
Yeah.
demon that cries out. He heard that in the middle of the night. He was able to capture that
Wow.
on film. The good news is the Haunted, which was on Animal Planet, picked up our story and did an episode on it.
Oh,
So
nice.
you can watch it, and all that evidence is on there.
No kidding. Wow, I'll definitely go and check that out for sure.
Yeah, the Haunted. It's called the demonic seduction.
Interesting.
The demonic seduction. Yeah, and that was the most formidable and the most nerving. I mean, I when I was in a rectory serving, when I first started doing this kind of paranormal stuff and beginning get a group together, there was stuff in the rectory, and I ended up having we caught some evidence. I wish I still had it. I don't. My friend couldn't find it, but I finally ended up getting a priest from Africa who was coming in, a very holy priest, and asked him to do an exorcism over the house, which he did. And he was able to tell me that there were witches who were cursing me. And he got that out. And within time, it left. I think the last thing was I was alone in the back room where my office was, and I heard noise again. And I just said, you're not scaring me, not at all. So you might as well stop. And it did. And I never heard anything again.
So
But
is this
people,
something
it's
you run into a lot?
no, no,
Okay.
my personal life, you mean?
Yeah, just in general.
No, not like that. Not like that. No, no.
Because I
But
have heard stories of, men that have been exorcists and whatnot and been kind of not attacked per se, but
oh
just
yeah,
followed and
yes,
have some
yeah.
run-ins with the guy downstairs.
Yeah, no, I have had spiritual warfare where things have just happened in the house, and you know that it's warfare because it's not anything like, the devil who's out there with a pitchfork and
Right.
horns and comes, but just a series of events, like natural events, but they're all happening to you. Like I can laugh about this now, but we were supposed to go and I was supposed to give a talk, and we were leaving for New Jersey, and I have an artificial eye. So I took my eye out to wash it. Now, when I was taking it out of the cup and the solution, it slipped through my fingers and started rolling on the sink, and I forgot that the stopper wasn't there because the
Oh,
stopper was
geez, went
broken.
down the pipe.
And I went right down the friggin' pipe. And
Oh
I went,
man.
oh, and it's like 1 or 2 in the morning. And I'm going, what am I going to do? I am not going to New Jersey and giving a talk with one eye missing. So thankfully, I called after a while. Like my maintenance guy, who's a saint and a good friend, came about 2:30, and I said, he goes, "Can I do it in the morning?" I said, "Well, it is the morning, and we're leaving for New Jersey." He came and he went into the sink and was able to retrieve it. He said, "I
Oh
think you better wash this." But that was, that clearly was an attack. I had, what was the other thing that I lost? Oh gosh. I'll think of it as we're talking, but
yeah.
it just happened recently. Sometimes my mind, I get senioritis.
I
But
think we all get that at some point.
yeah, yeah.
You'll,
But it could have been something very formidable, and it ended up being okay. But these are little things, little setbacks,
mhm.
that that the enemy just lets you know that you know is not taking. Well, I ended up in the hospital because of almost poisoning. My friend had moonshine that he
Oh,
made,
jeez.
and I wasn't used to moonshine, and I. I'm Irish and Italian, so
Yeah.
I like my Bacardi and diets. Well,
Yeah.
you can't drink moonshine like you drink that. Well, I didn't know that,
Yeah.
and I was so bad. I guess I collapsed. I don't remember any of it. I woke up in the hospital,
Jeez.
and my ethanol level was so high. My friend who's a nurse said, "Do you know you could have died? You could have got poisoning." And I went, and they couldn't understand it, my
Right.
friends, because my sugar level, because I'm diabetic, didn't go up that high. And my doctor told me, who I was just with, well, there's no carbs in that in the
Right.
moonshine.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, okay, that makes sense then. But again, that was right after the night I did a deliverance. It was at your friend Patrick's house.
No kidding. That was a pet. Okay. I got
Oh
you.
yeah, because
Speaking of which,
he had
today's
had
episode is brought to you by Boiling Guitars. Shout out to Pat, that got us connected in general.
yes,
Thank you,
boiling
Pat, for
guitars.
that.
He is amazing. Yeah, and so that was another personal thing because he was a friend.
Right.
And so when his girlfriend's son was attacked, and
Mm.
I was able to do it, and I was able to guide them on how to protect the land and all that. And to this day, the evil isn't there anymore. So, but I paid
Yeah,
a price for
his
it, and
house
they,
has a definite vibe to it. That's
oh yeah, yeah, because it's
interesting.
so close to the Conjuring house.
Yeah, so tell us about that. Did you have any involvement with that?
No, I never was in the Conjuring house. Um, I knew Lorraine Warren,
Right.
who was, but no. And by the time I felt like, you know what? I live in Rhode Island, so I had a friend of mine taking me to some reputable haunts, notable haunts in Rhode Island, just to
Yeah.
take a picture there, to say I was there. So
Yeah.
some cemeteries and all of that, and um, I wanted to take a picture at the Conjuring house, but then, the crazy owner, all of that. If you follow it on YouTube, it's a nightmare.
Mm.
So people that I respect in the paranormal field were very much hurt and quit. So I said, well, it's kind of almost like I felt like I'd be crossing the picket line
Hmm.
if I went there. So I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll wait till after it all gets in. So I have not been to the Conjuring house yet. Maybe when someone else when someone else owns it, hopefully I'll be able to do that,
Yeah, that'd be
with
great.
Patrick. Just to say I've been there because it's so notable. However, I'm going to say this on behalf of Patrick. His family was the original owners, his descendant, his ancestors. There's a lot of history to that house beyond The Conjuring.
Oh yeah, I'm
It's an
sure.
amazing homestead. And that gets forgotten because of The Conjuring. And a lot of the stuff in The Conjuring house that you saw in the movie was baloney.
Yeah.
And Lorraine Warren will tell you that. They just took it out, like that woman who hung herself. She didn't hang herself. She wasn't a witch. She was an
No,
upstanding woman
dramatic
in her
effect, I
community.
guess.
Yeah, Bathsheba, she wasn't. She was buried on consecrated ground. She was a witch. She would not be buried on consecrated ground. So, um, but yeah, so that was the most dramatic case I have. We've had some other cases, but there ended up being where the person really needs some psychological help more than, more than spiritual. And that's tough to tell them.
Oh
They
yeah.
don't want
I
to,
mean, it's definitely tough to discern. I mean, I've got
yeah,
family members that have struggled with mental health, and my wife,
right.
she's got anxiety and whatnot. Um, but yeah, sometimes I wonder, the way she gets into certain moods, like, are we dealing with something more here, or am I just, you know,
Yeah, I will say this. Sometimes they go hand in hand. Sometimes the demonic will also hide uh, uh, with mental illness.
right?
And that's why we're holistic. As Catholics, we're holistic. We don't just go in and say that's one's demon possessed. There's going to be an exorcism. No, 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 no. We can't do it just that willy-nilly. There has to be a psychological exam and a physical exam. And when that's exhausted and there's no explanation, then you go for the spiritual. And then, but there also might be some spiritual also there. So I tell people this is a two-pronged process. You
Mm.
need to get some emotional help and counseling for whatever you're going through, uh, and then we will pray with you also. But sometimes it's just psychological. It's paranoia, it's delusional stuff, and you know, and you can tell when they say like, "Oh, my family is upset with me and they won't talk with me," and it's everybody else's fault but the person. And so
Mhm.
right there, it's a red flag.
Oh yeah, no, there's
You
definitely
know,
some of that too, but
yeah.
it
Uh,
always kind of made me wonder. Like I've seen certain things in life that make you go, "Was that what I think it was?" Or
right. Oh,
am I
sure,
just thinking about it? You know?
sure. Um, and don't forget, demonic possession is rare, rarer. I won't say it's a little more prevalent now, but when these people call themselves exorcists, don't even get me started. Because if they saw a real demonic possession, like the heavy hitters like Father Carlos Martins, Father Gabriel Moth, Father Chad Rippinger, when they deal with a demon, it's formidable. It's dangerous. That's why we can't, as a priest, I can't do an exorcism. I have the power to do it. I can't do it without the bishop's permission. I need his blessing because the bishop has the fullness of the priesthood. And I have to fit the criterion for being able to handle something. If not, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's dangerous for the victim and it's dangerous for the priest and anybody involved. Uh, so what I think most people, guys, supposed quote exorcists unquote, are doing are really people who are oppressed, or attacked from the outside, um, or are obsessed, you know. And there is that type of there's a lot of that stuff, and people who have dabbled in occultic practices or divination that you know they attracted something, you know. But most of the stuff that I deal with are houses, homes, or places that are infested.
Usually
So
more like poltergeist type activity type of thing.
sometimes, yes, yes,
I gotcha.
yeah, or on the land. It's been on the land for many years. You know, where are you located?
I'm actually in Sterling, Mass, the
Okay,
town.
so you're in Massachusetts.
Yeah,
Okay, so in New England, I mean, there are Native American presence everywhere.
yeah.
So a lot of these haunted places are also on tribal lands. So there could be some of that stuff. I have a good friend of mine who's a shaman. So sometimes I feel good about being in the apostolate now, having them, represented there. Because when I can't discern what's going on, it could possibly be something on the land back from the Native Americans.
Right.
Um, and, you know, uh, I was wondering with the Conjuring House, there is a story being told that was told that there were Native Americans who were who were killed by by the Americans and buried in a wall there, and that
No,
quite possibly the Native Americans could have put a curse on those people
could
and
be.
their families, and that could be. That's just my opinion because I've also been working with a house in Johnston, Rhode Island, that still has every now and then activity, and I can't figure out what in the heck is going on. I got
Hmm.
rid of the demonic thing, but there's still like poltergeist activity and stuff. I'm thinking, could it be Native American on that land? Some of those people were related to the families of the Conjuring House. Could it be part of a curse? That's why I was thinking of that. So I got to I have a friend who's a shaman in Connecticut who's also gifted, who I'm sure would be able to figure that out. Once he steps on the land.
No, it's
Um,
interesting to me that, somebody in your position would bring in, a quote unquote pagan shaman. Um, you know, is he consider himself a Christian, or is this just kind of a
No,
traditional
but
thing?
well, I mean, I think he believes in Jesus and all of that, but not, yeah, no, I wouldn't call him a Christian per se.
Okay.
But again, when you're dealing with, I have a lot of respect for the Native American cultures. Always have since I was a kid.
Yeah, same here.
Sometimes you got to go to that. Like if I just got something in about a Muslim who's having problems, and they said, well, we don't believe in Jesus Christ, so how do we go about doing it? I said, well, it's really not going to work if you don't have that faith in that. I said, I think you have a thing called jinns, evil jinns. And he said, yes. I said, my opinion is they do have exorcists in the Muslim faith. I said, I would go to an imam and ask that because that's your culture, that's your faith tradition. So it's going to have effect in your life, just like the Jews have the divot box,
Right.
that. If they were Jewish, I would have them first go and have the rabbis who believed in that help them in that way. So, you know, I will. I mean, a lot of times non-Catholics and even non-Christians have asked me to come on board because they were desperate. And, there's no atheists in foxholes, as they say. So they were willing to say, yeah, use the Christian, use the Catholic stuff. That's what we wanted. They were open to that. But but then there's part B where once I do the rituals and things are cleared, you got to maintain that. And the only way you can maintain that is through faith, or else it will come back, you know. So it's yeah, it's a great journey, and I know that what I'm saying is not popular in a lot of church circles, but it's just been my experience that we try to work together, and it's a beautiful thing of understanding different cultures.
Well, I've always kind of thought that, God speaks to each of us in different forms and whatnot, and I think that's where a lot of other religions come from. I think he
Yeah,
was just trying to find other ways to communicate with us.
yeah. I mean, and there's good in most every other religion, and where there's good, God has a hand in there at some way, shape, or form. So, um, we believe as Catholics, especially since Vatican II in the 60s, that if someone practices their faith, they didn't really have an experience with Jesus Christ, but they're living their own faith and goodness, they can be saved still we believe through the sacrifice of Christ, but you know, indirectly, that sacrifice would help them too. It's a thing we learned in the seminary called the anonymous Christian. They're acting as though they were Christian, even though they're not Christian, and they could still be saved through the merits of the passion and resurrection of Christ because they never knew him, but they were living a life according to the dictates of their culture. You know.
No, it's certainly an interesting perspective on that. I've had a few talks with a couple of priests in my life, and we never quite end up on that side of things. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I know. It's not. Yeah, I mean, I find I kind of see myself, as conservative, and I am in the way that I believe in the traditional things, like I haven't thrown out, like I believe in miracles, apparitions, I believe in the rosary, I believe in incense and candles and all. Like I like all of that. I believe in the essentials of our faith, um, but also, you know, I've also come to respect other religions and my father has a lot to do with that because I was so interested in religion that my dad would take me like once a year to a synagogue and I would talk with the rabbi there and he would show me the synagogue and I would see the similarities in what's in a temple and what we have in the Catholic Church. And same thing with a Protestant. They're going to a Protestant church. So um, because I'm so grounded in my Catholic faith, I don't have to worry. Like, I'm not insecure. Sometimes I think people who are so closed to others, there may be a little bit of insecurity there that they have to shield themselves. I don't have to. I'm grounded, you know. Um, so
No, that's fantastic. I nice to get that kind of perspective. It's a breath of fresh air, I guess I could say.
oh, well, thank you.
No, definitely.
Well, I
So,
guess if I'm friends with Patrick, I have to be.
oh yeah, definitely. It takes a certain type to get along with guys like us.
Oh
So
yeah.
definitely, he's a good soul for sure.
Well, that's what Pope Francis says. You're gonna smell like your sheep. You got to go out there to the byways and don't. You can't stay in your ivory castles.
Right.
You got to go out to meet them where they're at. That's what Jesus did.
Now it makes complete sense on that end for sure. So before we wrap up here, again, I want to thank you, Bob, for coming on and spending an hour with me,
Not a
uh,
problem.
shooting the breeze a little bit. My last question of the night: what should people be like? What are the signs of this kind of stuff kicking up, other than what we see in the movies of any kind of demonic interaction or anything like? What should we be looking out for, or what would we notice per se?
Well, and it depends what in a house, when the activity could be, noises and stuff that people hear doors closed, or they'll hear footsteps, or they'll hear voices. That could be one thing. A friend of mine's house, basically the bed shook, like somebody was taking the leg of the bed and doing that. Or she has things on her mantle. This is a house from the 1700s, and stuff on the mantle is rearranged.
Hmm.
Uh, a couple of times they came in and the stove was turned on, and they know they didn't do it. Or things like that. And now okay, we're not doing this, so there's something up. Um, Other people see like a black shadow figures, or feel a heaviness in the house, or like really cold. And I've experienced that at Patrick's house.
Right.
But it wasn't a bad. It was family members, and when they were around, they actually felt cold. Um, their energy around me, and so so those are some of the areas that are just not normal. And that's when we try to go in and ascertain whether there is something. Yeah, but I caution paranormal investigators, if you're doing this, then you know that there's life beyond us. You need to have some kind of a faith, and you need to go in there properly protected. Prayer. You need to pray and you need to ask for protection, because you don't know what you're walking into. And if you're doing this for enough years, you're probably going to run into a negative spirit. You need to be prepared so it doesn't overwhelm you or go home with you, you know.
Yeah, it's the last thing any of us needs.
Oh, heck yeah.
Oh
Heck
boy.
yeah.
Well, Bob, thanks for coming on.
You're
Shoot the shit
welcome.
with me for a little while. Hopefully we'll do this again down the road at some
Sure.
point. God willing.
Absolutely.
But we'll catch you next time, folks.